Chagiga Daf Test Zion. So yesterday we talked about pretty much the entire daf is about Elisha ben Abuya and what went wrong after he went into Pardes. Today we're going to talk about the one person who actually successfully came out of Pardes, which is Rabbi Akiva. So Gemara opens up and mentions what was it about Rabbi Akiva? What did he know? Like, what was his antidote, so to speak, to help him go in and out unscathed? So we suggest various psukim that indicate that he knew basically not to look directly at Hashem. Like, he knew to avoid going in that direction because it could only lead to trouble, like the other three ran into. And then just because we spoke about Metatron or Metatron or however you pronounce it, so the Gemara brings up that there's actually there's certain similarities that demons have with Malachei Asharis, and then there's certain similarities that demons have with humans. So it's like a whole Gemara about characteristics of Shadim. What do they have similar to Malachei Asharis? That they, right here, that they have wings, that they fly, that they can see the future, and what do they have similar to humans? That they can eat, they reproduce, and they ultimately die. And then we move on to say what I think we say that Shadim, another brisa says Shadim have certain characteristics like humans and certain characteristics like animals. What do they have to do like humans? That they have a certain amount of like bina, of understanding, that they walk like standing upright, and that they ultimately that they can speak in Lashon HaKodesh. I said Shadim before, and I mean it's Malachei Asharis. And then there's certain characteristics that are like animals, which is that they can eat, reproduce, and they have a digestive system. That they also go to the bathroom. Interesting, esoteric type Gemara, but those are always the interesting ones. Moving on to the next part of the Gemara. So this is actually from the Mishnah, which says that if you do certain things, it's Ratuy lo shelo ba la'olam. It's almost better that you weren't created at all. One of the things that we say is someone who ponders what came before the world, what came after the world, what's above the world, what's below the world. So those all make sense, except for what happens before. I mean, what's wrong with, I understand you're trying to find out the future, that's usher, but like, if the past had already happened, what's so wrong about that? So Gemara says, is like the mashal, it's like someone who builds a palace on top of a garbage dump. So like, you want to keep the focus on what's there now and not what was there before. And although there wasn't a garbage dump before the world was created, there's nothing, constructive or good about what existed before the world. So you're not supposed to think about it. Then just because the Mishnah said kol shelo chas al kavod kono, that's another thing that makes it seem like you should not. That it's almost better like you're not in this world. So what does that mean? That you weren't respectful to your Creator. One option is if you stared at rainbows, which is not an ideal thing to do because rainbows are not a positive sign in Judaism. And Rabbi Yosef says that you did an avera b'seiser, and which is like equally insulting because when you do an avera in private, it's saying I don't care about human beings. Same idea with like a ganef and a gazlan, how it's worse to do it in private than in public because it's like you're saying I'm not afraid of humans. I'm not afraid of God, but I am afraid of humans, which is problematic. So then, because we mentioned this concept of it's better to sin in public than it is to sin in private. So we bring up a din by Aliyah bar Nachmani, who says three things. First of all, he says it's better to sin in private. So that was a bit of a contradiction. And he said why? Basically, he said like if you really feel the urge to sin, then you should like wear different clothing, go to a different place, make sure people don't see you and know who you are, and then you can sin there. My take on that is that if you put so much time and thought in between the urge and the actual action, then maybe it will prevent you from sitting there. But that's the first thing he says. Second thing he says is that certain things cause blindness because there's so much like kedusha and shechina involved. Bechas Kohanim, if you look at the Kohen, If you look at the Nasi, and if you look at a Keshes, a rainbow, then this leads your vision to become blurred. And the last thing he says is that you should never trust the Yetzer Hara. The pasuk says, "Al ta'aminu bara v'al tiftechu ba'aluf." So what does it mean? You shouldn't trust the bara and aluf. It refers to the Yetzer Hara will sometimes convince you that it's okay to sin, if it's like in your own home and no one can see you. But what he's saying is that the Yetzer Hara, like people, everyone can see you. Your walls will testify about you. Malachim will testify about you. There's nowhere you can hide where you don't feel like you can basically sin and nobody will see you. Next Mishnah we talk about is the smicha, this concept of, we're going back to Yantif, so this idea that there's a massive bench clearing brawl between the Av Beis Dins and the Nisim about whether or not you can do smicha to your Karban Shlamim on Yantif. And it just records all the different people, like Yosef ben Yochanan says that you can, Yosef ben Yosef says you can't, Nitai Rabbeinu says you can, Yeshua ben Prakha says you can't, Shimon ben Shana says you can, Yehuda ben Tavai says you can't, Shemaiah says you can, Abtalion says you can't, Hillel says you can, and Shammai says you can't. So it's like tons, historically this is a massive argument, and it's quite powerful. So first thing we want to know is I think the Gemara opens up by saying that this is a battle royale between the Av Beis Dins and the Nisim. So like who's who? We're trying to figure out. To me, by the way, this is a crazy, I don't understand this at all. Like historically, you don't know who's the Av Beis Din, who's the Nasi. How could that be? But the Gemara tries to figure it out. We bring up a story. It's a famous story where Yehuda ben Tabai mentions that he only one time did he ever kill an Eid Zomim, and it was one person. And Shimon ben Shetach basically proves to him that you're never allowed to kill Eid Zomim unless there are two of them. So he made Yehuda ben Tabai realize that he killed an Eid Zomim that he wasn't supposed to. And Yehuda ben Tabai basically cried his entire, for the rest of his life by the guy's grave trying to do tshuva. So we're trying to figure out from that story who is the Beis Din in that scenario, who is the Nasi, and that kind of uncovers the Mishnah that tells who's who in that situation. And then the next thing is Rabbi Yochanan says you can tell just how serious this concept of Shavuos is, because why can't you do smicha and yatif? There's people who say that you can't, because when you lean on an animal, it's as if you're kind of working it, so to speak, with your whole body. So that's something that you're not allowed to do. And then the Gemara, at least on today's daf, concludes just talking about what it means to do smicha. Do you lean your whole body on it? Do you just lean on the head or the sides? And that's going to finish up Daf Chagiga, Daf Tes Zayin.